Patrick Conley, glad to be with you again, along with Kayla Mayer, our producer, Paul Sodick, our technical producer, coming to you through the studio at the Archdiocesan Catholic Center in St. Paul. Hey, in case you missed it, Pope Francis gave the Church a new apostolic exhortation on October 4th, entitled Laudate Deum, a follow-up to his encyclical Laudato Si from 8 years ago. Here to talk about the contents of this new apostolic exhortation and about Catholics and the climate crisis is Adam Fitzpatrick, who serves as the Social Mission Outreach Coordinator for the Archdiocesan Center for Mission. Welcome back to the program, Adam. Great to have you with us.
Thanks, Patrick. It's good to be back on.
So now my understanding is on October 4th, we wrapped up something called the Season of Creation. Can you take us into that? What is the Season of Creation?
So the Season of Creation is an ecumenical celebration of creation which takes place from September 1st to October 4th. This is actually, it's been going on for a number of years, even before Pope Francis decided, hey, Catholics should be in on this celebration. Patriarch Bartholomew, who he quotes in Laudato Si, is a key part of the Season of Creation, and now the Pope Francis has taken it on. It's also grown to new heights. This period is good for our own reflection on creation, and October 4th is important because it's the feast day of St. Francis of Assisi, so that's where they chose as an ecumenical group to close this season of creation.
It makes total sense to me, and St. Francis, of course, so affiliated with so many elements of creation as well, and you know, it's a good thing, and especially there's a lot of coincidences going on here because we've got St. Francis's Day on October 4th, where we're honoring him, from whom Pope Francis, of course, took his name, and as the culmination of the season of creation, Pope Francis issues this new apostolic exhortation, Laudate Deum. So take us into that. What is Laudate Deum? And obviously significantly released on St. Francis's feast day at the close of the season of creation. What is it? I will admit I have not yet read it.
So I did read it because when I see a new document from the church out, I read it pretty much the day it comes out because that's just my leadership style in terms of of how I manage my ministries. I like being well informed on what's going on. Laudate Deum is a nice size. It's an apostolic exhortation, which in terms of church levels of authority is pretty significant. But it is an 18-page document, so it's nicely accessible. I'm gonna like giving this as a resource for people that want a quick, concise method of what is going on with some aspects of the climate crisis, but also concerns about international response. So the Laudate Deum is looking at three major things. One is a response for others as to why, for concerns on why they haven't responded to the climate crisis yet. Second is looking at the history of international agreements and expressing some joys but some disappointments about what has happened in terms of the multilateral agreements from across the world. And then he is always consistent in Laudato Si and in Laudate Deum to be looking at the idea that climate change is borne by the most vulnerable. And as such, we have to be paying special attention to the poor. He does talk a little bit about loss and damage reparations that for the global South, because that's been a key part of the COP28 lead up, is this loss and damage. I might be wording that incorrectly, but the other piece is that international trade and agreements have often led to the poor bearing the brunt of the pollution and waste. We also see this locally in our Twin Cities area because the areas that are held by the most poor individuals are the ones where we place new industrial factories. It's where we put expose contaminants, and it is where we develop and leave very little green space to deal with the urban heat island effects and other pollutants that come forth.
So for those who might be unfamiliar with Laudato Si, maybe just give us a little background on that as well. I mean, it sounds like some of the themes are repeated between Laudato Si and Laudate Deum. But that perhaps is a longer encyclical that was actually promulgated about 8 years ago, as I remember. Maybe give us just a bird's eye view of Laudato Si as well.
So Laudato Si came out in May of 2015. So you're right around 8 years. This document was the first comprehensive teaching of the church on the environment. So a lot of popes have made statements and addresses to different audiences about various pieces of the environment, and there's some mention of the environment, particularly going back to Vatican II. Gaudium et Spes is a little bit on the environment, and popes have written other messages in very small sections of encyclicals, usually a paragraph or two on the environment. So Laudato Si is culminating a lot of that information from bishops around the world and creating a comprehensive teaching on the environment, which already existed but was not fully developed into something as comprehensive as Laudato Si was. Laudato Si is also looking at the basic idea of integral ecology, which is the idea that we live in an interconnected relationship with all things. And so when we act in the world, our decisions have to be focused on the environment, how we are affecting our environment, and how we are affecting our neighbors as well. Like, he is very much just to talk about the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor.
Yeah, these are themes that obviously the Catholics should be aware of and responding to based on that. And Laudate Deum, as I understand what you were saying there, Adam, is that it's kind of a check-in some 8 years on some of the main themes of Laudato Si. Is that correct?
Yep, and a more urgent call to action. So Laudato Si was really trying to build up what does the environment and an integral ecology look like as a base teaching to start from. Laudate Deum is saying, with these extreme weather events that have happened, with elements of temperature rise, sea level rise, quality of fresh water going down, and seeing a lack of urgency and action in international agreements and lack of enforcement on international agreements, we're in a really challenging situation. And while he doesn't want to sound a drastic alarm in terms of we need like population reduction or anything of that ilk, because there are some people that will argue that, he's not arguing that. He is calling us to be more attentive to, all right, we can't, it's like we would create jobs if we add more renewable energy and more of a just transition away from fossil fuels. When Pope Francis is trying to spark more urgency. So it's not like just a check-in, it's also more of a, hi, we need to start responding more now because this is going to look very bad if we don't respond to it.
Yeah.
And part of our Catholic moral tradition is also, we are responsible for the actions we commit and the actions we neglect to do. And Pope Francis is saying we can't ignore what's going on any longer.
Yeah, okay. And as we're talking about that, Adam, one of the things that strikes me, it occurs to me, is that some of the things you mentioned seems to be, they need to be addressed from a governmental level and maybe from a corporate level and things like that. How would you say that Laudate Deum, and specifically Pope Francis's call to urgent action, affects the average pew sitter in a Catholic church? I mean, what difference does it make in my life?
In our lives, it gives what is our example as Catholics is really the question that Pope Francis is looking at here. Is like, so how do we live our own lives, and how do our own choices create demand for actions which might be harmful to the environment? And so it's calling us to look at our purchasing habits. It's calling us to look at like how much energy we use in our own houses. Is like, are there ways that we can create more renewable energy? Are there ways that we can conserve water or use rain barrels to collect water for certain instances? Now, he's not giving any of these specific solutions. Some of those are also coming from my own work, working with the Care for Creation team serving the Archdiocese. But for the average Catholic, if we're going to address this crisis, we are a key population that can be the example of how we want to live and how we invite others in the rest of the world to live that's not involved in Catholicism.
Yeah.
I think Pope Francis's two commitments in this document that he repeats again, everything is connected and no one is saved alone, also calls us to look at how we have relationships within the community, and is the space of our tent enlarging, as the global synod theme is really striking home with.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and it occurs to me too, because some of the themes that you're talking about there, purchasing habits and care of creation, even in our local spheres of influence, things like that, are things that are stressed by others in our archdiocese. I know Dr. Christopher Thompson in his Green Thomism, Jim Ennis in Catholic Rural Life talks about the morality of eating and purchasing and that sort of thing that we do, and so a lot of this does strike home. But another thing that occurs to me is that this actually plays a role in our own credibility and viability as Catholics who want to spread the word about Christ, obviously, in the larger world too, and saying that, hey, Jesus is the one who created all of this, and so as Catholics, as his followers, this is something that we need to be concerned about as well, right?
Yeah, because whatever language we use, and I've heard several different sets of language used just depending on the various audiences I'm a part of. So the idea of either being in right relationship with the environment, in shalom with all of creation, or stewardship of resources are all ways to express a similar idea of we have to care about what is going on around us, because if God created all of the universe, which we believe as Catholics, then yes, it is our responsibility to help take care of it and to notice when problems are arising. And a key way to notice the problems are arising is looking at extreme weather patterns that are happening even in Minnesota. Now, we're not getting as destructive of weather patterns as, say, the global south or even the west and the east coast of the United States. But we are getting more significant snowfall. We broke records for snowfall last year. We've had months of drought, and we're maybe coming out of what is technically drought conditions because of all the rain we've had in the last week and a half. But I only mowed my lawn twice this summer because it didn't rain that much, and that's abnormal.
Wow.
That's extremely abnormal. So it's inviting us to pay attention to these patterns as the signs of the times, and then say, what can we do in terms of our own lives, but then also having conversations with people in our community and with local elected officials. Those are all possible things that we can do to say, hey, we need more action on this.
That's very good. Yeah. So, just in our last minute or so together, Adam, I wanted to ask you: are there specifically? I mean, a lot of things you talked about, great individual suggestions or suggestions that can be enacted by the family. Any group things that people should be aware of? Any efforts that are more, perhaps wider than just the family that are going on in the Center for Mission that people can be part of?
Yep, so we have a Care for Creation team that serves the Archdiocese, which is also, we are also connecting with other dioceses to develop a Laudato Si statewide chapter of Minnesota. And this group works on developing prayer and educational resources. We are in conversation with a lot of groups doing environmental work on the ground so that to inform more of what is happening so that we can speak with our own local elected officials and some of our national representatives as well. We are also developing education resources. We have a collaboration with the University of St. Thomas for the Sustainable Communities Partnership, which is helping us gather research together in preparation for an Archdiocesan Laudato Si action plan. That Laudato Si action plan would be looking to be comprehensive. So how can we look at our individual habits? How can we look at our church habits? And how can we look at how we are involved with society? And the other thing in terms of thinking in terms of church, things we can do as a church is look at our land usage. Are we watering our lawns when we don't need to be watering our lawns? Are we planting native grasses? Are we looking at renewable energy in our buildings? For example, parishes can apply for the Net Zero Pathways program. We were chosen as a pilot diocese by the Catholic Climate Covenant to implement a Net Zero Pathways program. So there's a grant going on through the Catholic Community Foundation. The deadline's today, but I know a number of parishes have been working on this grant for a while. So they're going to select 4 parishes to work on a pathway to net zero. And I think in terms of churches, the message I would invite for all of us in the Catholic faith is looking at our own ideas for development. Do we need to build more, or can we recycle or reuse places that are already in existence for church, as churches, or as whatever we might want, so that we don't have to disrupt environmental areas or how we can better use our land. Some parishes sometimes have several acres of land, and this could be a nice invitation to see, all right, well, what would naturally grow in our area? How do we have less maintenance? Because I can't imagine anyone likes spending 3-4 hours on a lawnmower, on a riding lawnmower going around several acres of grass. Like if you plant natural prairie grasses or something natural to the area, then you don't have to have that maintenance in the same way, and it's more drought resistant.
Sure. All right. Well, great suggestions from our guest, Adam Fitzpatrick, and grateful that you have joined us today on Practicing Catholic to give us some boost in terms of our idea of creation care and how we can live that out more fully as practicing Catholics. Adam, thanks for joining us on Practicing Catholic. God bless you and all you do.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. Thanks for your time.
Keep up with everything going on at the Center for Mission at centerformission.org. And to read the Holy Father's Apostolic Exhortation for yourself, just do a web search for Laudate Deum.